1. All right. So, welcome back. We've got a very small class today. And today's going to be fairly low-key. I just want to, because yesterday we had our minimum viable product, right? But we only exported a poster. Today we're going to make it move. So here's what we finished yesterday, right? Got this really nice rendering with nice compositing up here and our downloaded assets and our PBR textures. Great, but it's just a static image. So how do we make things move? Do you have experience in After Effects or anything that involves keyframes? Yes. Great. So this is going to be a lot easier in that case, because for anyone who might be watching this retroactively, hi David, if you're watching, go ahead and pop a comment. It's basically the same as any kind of keyframing system in any kind of software, like After Effects or Premiere. And basically what it does is, instead of having to draw every single frame like you would have to for, say, a hand animation, you're just doing the keyframes, or the main positions that your object is going to be in, and then the computer's interpolating between them. So how do we make keyframes and stuff like that? Well, that's what we are doing today. So go ahead and boot up a new Blender file. And then, so we've got our default cube, right? There are, and David's been screwing around with this already, there are a few ways to make a keyframe, but the most obvious is if you press I on your keyboard. With the object selected, that will bring you to the Insert Keyframe menu. Now you can choose a keyframe channel to put it in. Let's keep it to rotation. Let's use location, rotation, and scale just this whole time, which will add a keyframe on the location channel, the rotation channel, and the scale channel. So now let's go ahead and skip forward on our timeline to a later frame. So let's say I'm going to go to frame 60, which at, are we at 30 frames a second or 24? I can. We're at 24 frames a second, so that's not going to be round to a second, but it's a good frame number to use. And go ahead and use your translation gizmos and your other gizmos to just move it around a little bit. And then once you've done that, press I and add another keyframe. So now, if we go back to the beginning of the timeline and hit play, we can see that it interpolates between these two positions. So you can hit the space bar to hit the play as well, as usual. And that right there is the very basis of keyframing. It can get a little more complex though. First thing I want to point out, and we had some problems with this yesterday, if your object has keyframes, you can't move it again without adding another keyframe. So if I were to move it again, at first everything appears right. But the moment that I move my playhead around, it snaps back to its position. And it will also do that if we go to render, even though it won't appear to have done that in the viewport, which can cause a lot of confusion. And that's why David's lights yesterday were all stacked on the same spot, because the original light he had made had a keyframe in it, which therefore he moved them all. That's great, but as soon as the playhead moved or the render was hit, they all snapped back to that position with the keyframe. And that there is the very basis of animation. So I'm going to get a little bit more complex into this on how to work with keyframes in Blender, but I'm not going to get too complex because, kind of like UV unmapping, more so, animation is a field that people will spend an entire 4 years in a college studying. So we obviously, in this introductory class, can't do too much with it, but we might as well get an idea of how to use it, and I'm going to do that by showing you the basics of how you would get a camera animation done in our backrooms scene. So before we switch back to that, let's talk about curves. So up in the top hand area right here, let's switch to our animation workspace. And by default, it has, this is what it looks like. This isn't very helpful because we don't actually get access to the curves, and I don't know why they've decided to make it like this, because really this should be a graph editor over here. So let's go ahead and switch this window right here into a graph editor. So go ahead and click the top left, and then select Graph Editor under the Animation dropdown. So now we can see a graph of all of our animation curves in our scene, on our cube. Note you can only see the curves of the object that you have actively selected. Each one of these curves represents a different animation channel. So there are currently, my math is correct, 12, or it's not, but there's a certain number of animation channels that we have on this cube. So we have our X, Y, and Z location. Then we have our, it looks like we're in Euler rotation, so we've got our X, Y, and Z rotation, and then we have our X, Y, and Z scale. So that's going to be 9 animation channels for location, rotation, scale, keyframe. We can play with these curves, and basically each one of these curves is a graph of the numerical value within that animation channel over time. So the x-axis is time, the y value is the value of the animation channel. You'll notice that some of these are going off screen, like this green line up here is going off screen, and if I'm not mistaken, that's because it is, what channel is this? Not actually sure which channel this is. In any case, this can happen. A lot of the time, a few of your animation channels will change by only, say, a scale degree of about 5 in this case. And then we've got one that is changing by a scale degree of 90. So how do we deal with this? Well, what we can do is, first of all, we could just pan around like this, using the standard viewport controls. Another thing we could do is if we hold down Control, and then, or no, that's a different program. I'm getting my programs confused, that's fine. If we use the handles here on the scroll bar, we can actually change the vertical multiplier. So if we're working with larger scale degrees, we can actually fit the entire curve on screen. Or, and this is probably the easiest method, you click the Normalize button up here. And now if we go ahead and look at this again, what it's done is it's basically remapped visually all of the channels from 0 to 1. And now we get a nice clean view of all of our animation channels. So next we have the handles here. So ultimately, these are Bezier curves right now in the graph. And if you know anything about Bezier curves, you know that they are defined by a set of points, in this case our keyframes, and then each one of those points has a set of handles which can turn the way the curve acts. So we can manipulate these handles to adjust how our cube interpolates between these two keyframes. In this case, I can make it say so that it takes a little bit more of a curved path up to get there instead of a straight path, and I do that adjusting this Z curve. Or I could make it so that it spins up there pretty fast and then comes to a stop. You can also move the keyframes around. So you can change, for instance, if I move this, well, this isn't a very strong keyframe. Let me find my Z location. If I were to translate this, now all of a sudden, if I translate it on the y-axis, we're actually changing our Z value at this keyframe. And if I change it on the x-axis, it'll change the time at which it arrives at this Z value from the keyframe. And that's really important to understand. Although we created a location, rotation, and scale keyframe, what we actually did was we created 3 keyframes, or actually 9 keyframes, each for the 9 animation channels that we have. And we can move those individually. So here I've made it now so that it doesn't actually arrive at its vertical position until a little bit later than when it arrives at its horizontal position. And then finally, one little trick you can do is if you add a keyframe in the middle of 2 keyframes, it will actually be added in a way so that it doesn't inherently modify the curve, but now you can adjust it. So you get an additional set of handles essentially in the middle of this curve. So what I could do is I could move it slightly and add that as a keyframe. And now my location's got a bit of a wiggle to it in the way that it goes up there. And if you, for instance, added just a location keyframe in the middle of 2 low-growth scale keyframes, your scale and your rotation keyframes and the animation in those channels will not be touched. So that's really helpful if you're, say, animating a camera and you want the camera to move like it's on a dolly and you've got it moving straight, but now you want to animate it to look around a little bit as you're doing that and you don't want to mess up your location while you're doing that. You can just add rotation keyframes. So go ahead and play around with that a little bit. And how about we reconvene at about 6:25? Yeah.
So Sam, what are the best case use scenarios for moving the object around with keyframes or using the graphs or say even manually entering numbers?
So generally, you're going to want to block out your motion using keyframes. And then once you've blocked out your motion, you're going to want to go into the graph and refine it. And you're rarely going to want to be entering direct numbers as your keyframes unless you're like explicitly making something spin 360 degrees in a circle.
Also, what are some impossible cases? Like, remember when Len accidentally messed up the topology on his model on the first day? Are there similar situations in animation where, say, you can get the graph in a certain way that confuses the computer or whatever?
It's a lot harder to get your animation to do something weird, especially since the moment you play it, you're going to notice that it's not right. Unlike modeling, there's less traps that you can fall into with animation that aren't going to come back to bite you in the butt until later. Because animation ultimately comes a lot later in the pipeline. With modeling, you're doing the very base foundation that then you're going to do a lot of work expanding upon. And you can have problems that only manifest once you do that expansion work. But when it comes to animation, ultimately, as long as the animation looks good, it's probably good. One thing that I've experienced before is if you accidentally get keyframes in between your video frames and the keyframe's doing something weird, it can look okay when you play it, but then when you render it, it's got weird motion blur. But that only really happens if you're really messing with it more than what you should be doing. So that happened to me when I was trying to write a program to export Minecraft replay files into Blender as animations. and then that started being a problem. But that's not going to happen to you unless you're really tinkering with it under the hood.
It's not easy, but it's an interesting learning curve. It's a bit different than Maya. So the key, it's just not knowing the shortcuts are kind of making me a little bit mad, but hey, it's still fun. I'm gonna make the cube. Well, I'll just show you what I have so far. Right here. Bam.
Nice. How'd you get the bottom to like cut off like that?
The bottom to cut off?
Wait, play it again?
Oh, like that?
Yeah. Oh, you're scaling, you're not scaling it on the z-axis.
Oh, well, that is on the z, right?
Well, sorry, no, you're scaling it on everything but the z-axis. That's how you did it. It looks good.
Thank you.
I was confused about how you did that. All right, so, ooh, now I remember this, what I was gonna show. All right, so now let's get on to the bread and butter of what we're actually going to cover today, and that's camera animation. So have you ever seen the Flash TV show?
Yes.
Okay. Nice. What season did you get to?
My uncle had it on. I'm just seeing season 4.
Okay.
I've seen the scene where Reverse Flash and Flash were running through the city.
That's like 50 scenes.
I've seen all the way up to season 6, but then I've seen clips up till season 8. So.
Okay, cool. So Ben, you'll probably remember this scene. And the only version I can find is at 480p quality, so that's what we're gonna have to deal with.
I love that you're referencing this show.
Oh, no, my sound's not working. Why is my sound not working? Because I turned it all the way down. There we go.
Is that all it takes to scare you off? And he chose you over me.
Comes? Who are you? I don't have time to explain this to you right now. You're me. I'm sorry. I have to do this, so it'll make sense eventually.
Where are you, O chosen one?
So, how would you rate the CGI in that scene? See, that's the thing. It's rendered very well. It has objectively good-looking, it's got objectively good-looking imagery. You look at the, look at the reflections on those windows. Yeah, they tried to do CG faces, which was probably not the best idea. But there's one big flaw, and that's the camera movement. Take a look at this camera. And see, I don't know if that's just because I have a trained eye, but to me, that camera movement screams CGI fake. And the reason for that is because it doesn't make sense. The camera doesn't make any sense how it's achieving that. It's just floating all over the place with no respect to like actual physics.
And the camera can't do that.
So here is the main thing that you got to think about when you're animating your CG camera. And that is, if I were shooting this in live action, how would I get this shot? And it doesn't have to make a lot of sense. In the Spider-Man movies, what they oftentimes have is they have the camera swinging behind him almost as if it was held by another Spider-Man who was swinging and holding the camera, which doesn't make any sense in the story. But what it does is it tricks the mind into thinking, oh yes, this could be a real shot. Not, oh yes, this is a camera that someone keyframed to move around in Blender.
I always thought it was like Peter Parker snapping videos for the Daily Bugle.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's that, but like, I'm talking about like the fight scenes and the scenes where he's swinging through the city.
Okay, right, for sure.
So, what I'm probably gonna go for in this scene, no, that's not mine. This one's mine. What I'm probably going to go for is some kind of dolly shot. So that means the camera stays completely level with the ground. It doesn't change any orientation relative to the ground. And the head of the camera, its rotation is completely detached from the movement of the camera. So, let's get started doing that, shall we? And you can do any type of shot you want. I just think a dolly shot, because I don't want to deal with animating like camera shake, makes the most sense right now.
I'd love to see a shot where the camera like goes into the chest or into the cannon.
That would be cool. I feel like that would be a lot harder to get to look convincingly. I feel like I could probably pull it off, but I want to keep it simple for this class right now. And also there's nothing, I don't think the entire side of this chest is a model. I could be wrong about that, but. Yeah, there wouldn't be anything to see inside the chest. Does my numpad work? Hold on. I feel like, no, this works. Why won't Blender accept that hotkey? Sorry, I've just been dealing with this entire class. It's like, my numpad is not working, and I can't, oh, because I changed it on my laptop to, I don't remember what I changed it to, but I changed that hotkey because my laptop numpad didn't work. All right, let me fix this. You can start figuring out, while I'm doing this, how you want your shot to look.
Okay. While I do that, is it okay if I just add some more lights?
Oh, yes. Lighting and camera go hand in hand. So if you do your camera move and then decide you want another light, that is a perfect time to do it.
All right, Gabriel, what camera movement are you in for?
I don't really know yet. I want to try to add some camera shake, I would imagine. I don't know. I'm going to try to just...
I will let you know that camera shake is a little bit more advanced.
Wouldn't it just like be going on what the X or Y, the X and Y axis, and then just like making it go in a straight line, and then the jiggle would just be the Z, right?
No.
No?
It's a fair bit more advanced to get a realistic camera shake. It's also worth noting that while your temptation is to animate that manually, it can actually be very time-consuming. And, oh, why did I set it to control numpad 0? There we go. Okay, well, I fixed my Blender installation. And there are ways to automate that, which we're going to cover next. So let's see here. What do I want my camera to do? So I'm going to start by inserting a keyframe, a location, rotation, scale keyframe. Oh, and one more thing. If you click this button, if you click the auto keying button at the bottom, what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that whenever you move the object, it creates a new keyframe.
Yes. Is this the circular button?
What?
On the left?
This.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to use that. So whenever you move it or scale it or anything, it'll
Yeah.
set a keyframe?
Yeah. So let's see. That is going way too fast for my liking. Let's slow that down. Still don't like how fast this is going. There we go, that looks a fair bit better. And now here's what I'm going to do with this Dolly Shot. Let me go into the animation workflow and switch to the graph editor up here. I'm actually going to, first of all, I'm going to delete all the current rotation keyframes, because when you're dealing with a dolly in real life, right, you have your someone pushing the tripod, but then someone else is usually actually like rotating the camera. And so what you want to do in that case to replicate it is I'm actually going to use a separate set of keyframes and a separate animation pass to do the rotation than I did with the position, because they're not going to be perfectly in sync. So maybe I'll come around here, and I'm going to disable this for now so I can have more control over what channels I'm adding to. So let's add our start rotation keyframe here. So it's not going to even rotate here. And then maybe here, let's start to look a little this way. Add another rotation keyframe, and then by the end, let's look down at the box. And let's see how this looks. Still going pretty fast for my liking. Maybe slow this down a little bit.
Can you stretch the animation as you
Yeah,
would,
you can.
on Premiere?
Yeah, if I select everything and then I just scale, I can stretch this. So maybe I want my, you know what, I don't like how uniform it is in decelerating. I'm gonna make this take a little bit less time to decelerate. Actually, you know what? And then I'll do the same thing for the rotation. Where are my keyframes here? There they are. Let me normalize this so I can see what I'm doing. So this I'm going to scale down a little bit, maybe make this take a little bit less. And just thinking about stuff like, even the more esoteric stuff like, well, when you're moving up and down on a tripod, it's usually harder to tilt than it is to pan. So let's make the tilting take a little bit longer in this case. And maybe that's gonna take a little bit longer to slow down as well. And then same thing for when it starts turning. Let's make our tilting take a tiny bit longer. And tilting is rotation on the x-axis, by the way. And you know what? My animation stops a little bit too abruptly, so let's actually undo that change that I did earlier and make this take a little bit longer to slow down. You know, I should probably start turning as well a little bit earlier. And now this is starting to feel like it could be someone trying to use a dolly. And you know, they'd probably actually turn to look full on at the chest. So let me slightly adjust my last rotation keyframe as well. And this is when I would be moving stuff around here. There we go. So playing with it in the graph editor can go a long way in reducing that very sort of computerized, keyframed look. Let's maybe have it look a little bit farther down as well. And you know, it's probably going to stop rotating on the other axes a tiny bit before it stops moving. So that can come over here. And the entire thing is probably going to take a little longer, so let's bring that out. And crap, I can see past this wall, so let me just cheat it by extending this. One technique that you can do in Source Filmmaker that I wish you could do in Blender is you actually, you keyframe your position, and then you puppeteer your rotation and then smooth it out, but I don't know how to do that in Blender. So. All right, so finally, and I feel like personally my animation is done. So I'm going to find the last keyframe, which is about here, and I'm going to set at the bottom here. We can set what our timeline start and end is. So we're starting on frame 1. Let's end it at 140 for me.
So that way your video doesn't go past that?
Yeah. And that's basically going to end your video, and that's going to be really important later on because we want to make sure we're not rendering more than we have to. And one thing I also noticed when playing this thing in preview mode is that I didn't properly rack focus, and now my chest is out of focus because my camera moved. So let's go ahead, and I'm actually going to set my focus object instead of a distance, and let's just set the focus object to the chest so that it will automatically rack focus when we need it to. And you know what, while we're at it, I'll animate this chest to open as we're doing this. So I'll select, and this is where I'm happy that I have a separate model here. I can animate this separately, so let's find a good frame for it to start opening. Actually, opening seems to make sense to sort of just sort of motivate this camera move to look at the chest. So let's have it open at the very beginning here. So we'll start by, let me clear that note. Let me set this rotation back to here, and to rotate in local space, because if you'll notice I tried rotating on just on the Y, but it's not going to work properly because this chest is slightly rotated. So I RX and then I press X again, and now I'm rotating in local space. So let's go ahead and set a rotation keyframe here. And this probably won't take very long to open, so I'll set the other keyframe about here and insert another rotation keyframe. And now it's opening on its own, but what if I want it to be like thrown open? Okay, well let's try adjusting our curves a little bit, our animation curves. So I'll go ahead and select this, get everything in frame here, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to rotate that slightly, and then I'm going to scale this up so that it begins its animation very suddenly and then slows down. And that happens a little bit too slow, so let's do that. Maybe. That would be a little bit harder given this rig to make it rattle, because this isn't a proper rig, this is just two items, so I'd have to parent them both to something. And plus, it doesn't really make sense, this doesn't really feel like it's something that would rattle. It's a very solid chest. The way to make it rattle would be more likely with sound design than actually animating it, because it would be hard to actually figure out, well, what does a chest rattling look like? That's kind of difficult to, I mean, I could probably animate the handles a little bit, make them rattle, but like, there wouldn't really be much to it. It would be more a question of sound design. How do I make it feel like it's rattling? And that's what a lot of this comes down to, actually, is sound design and figuring out how does sound play into your rendering.
So then so you're saying like rather than animating the chest once it opens, like to bounce against the springs or whatever, you would do that in sound design?
Probably, yeah. You would want to do that in sound design. Because it's not something that would be in the real world, unless you were doing like a cartoon animation of it like jumping in the air and rattling. In the real world, that's not something that would be significant enough to actually visually read on screen, right? You just wouldn't be able to see it. And a lot of this comes down to watching the real world, a lot of it comes down to watching the real world and then like observing patterns in the real world and learning how to replicate them. So if you're interested, here's an example of what good sound design can do.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
So for that shot in particular, the bird was just stock footage, and then I did some fancy time remapping on it in After Effects, and then just composited in the opening up of the front. So it's really driven by the sound design, because if there wasn't sound design, it would just feel like, oh, you slowed it down in post-production, and now it's just a freeze frame. But with sound design, it really sells it. And in fact, that whole sound design there was completely done from scratch. I recorded myself saying what the F into a microphone on my phone, and then took a stock sound of like a park or whatever, and then, yeah. So sound design drives a lot of this type of stuff. And obviously we're not really covering that in this class, because I expect that most people here will already have a program of choice that they like to do sound design in. But especially for CG stuff like this, sound design goes a long way in selling it. All right.
Is that David in the chat now?
That might be. I'm not looking at the chat. I probably should be. I don't see anyone in the chat. All right, so let me know once you're ready to move on. And I can show you how to do camera shake, because today's a very low-key day. It's technically optional, actually, when it comes to this curriculum I put together. Yesterday was the minimum viable product, so just kind of day for questions, day for going. Animation's the main thing I wanted to cover, just because you might find it useful, but ultimately, it's just a day for any additional content.
Nice. I appreciate that. Messed up his chest.
Ah, yes, you found the chest model. No, you used the chest model initially, and then I copied you.
You actually picked it first because you're like, oh, you're using the one that I use. We can get your screenplay. And then, yeah.
I think we found it about the same time. So what do you got?
I'm just gonna go not straight, probably over here. I don't really have anything yet, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, a lot of it is like, imagine I'm like actually on set in this real place. What kind of shot do I want to get?
Oh my God, shift.
Then also, if you have your mouse over a view that's currently looking from the camera and then hit Shift tilde, you can look around like a video game.
Thank you.
Wait, have you been working off your laptop this whole time?
Yes. No, not the whole time. I just brought it today.
Hmm.
'Cause, I don't know. It's nice working on your own stuff.
Actually, Sam, that's a good question. For Premiere, right? If you want to transfer a project from one computer to another, you have to transfer the entire folder with the project files and the source footage.
Yeah, we covered that day too. I think you were in your meeting.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. But I assume it's much simpler for that.
No, it's the same thing. You have to transfer all your dependencies as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and we covered project folder management and all that type of stuff.
Sam, remember you said if you how do you go to the focus?
Well, first of all, you have to select your camera.
I have it selected.
Okay, cool. Then you enable depth of field, which you don't have enabled right now.
There we go.
And then you can change. Right now, you've got your focus distance set up to a particular object. You can either set it to a different object, or you can manually set it. So that right now, I'm not sure what that's doing there, but that's not what your focus is set to. Your focus is set to wherever cube is. So now you're going to focus on the barrel. And if your camera moves or the barrel moves, you're gonna automatically, sorry, that's a Canon. Mine is a barrel, which Ben called a Canon. So
is it like a real camera? Or?
it follows the same rules as a real camera. It's got, like if you adjust your f-stop, it will adjust your focus size. Adjusting your f-stop won't actually change your exposure, which is nice. You get completely separate control over your exposure versus your focal distance, but uses real f-stop values. You can set how many blades you want. You can set your focal length using like real lens values.
What about focus though? So if
Focus,
I move forward, will I have to refocus like a, a real
you
camera?
would if you didn't set your focus object,
okay.
But what your focus object does is it automatically essentially sets that object to be your focus point.
Nice.
So if you move your camera, it will automatically rack focus to that object, but it is actually racking focus and not doing just like CGI trickery. It is doing the same things in the render engine as if you had manually keyframed your rack focus to happen. So back with this camera animation I did, let me pull that up. Okay, so remember this thing, this animation from the first day? What I did in this case to get the nice depth of field effects was I put an empty object on top of this, and then I set the camera to have that as its focus distance. So once the animation came in, essentially you'll notice that like it follows proper camera rules. So you'll notice right now the entire scene's relatively in focus, but once the focus distance moves a lot closer to the lens when the camera moves in, it becomes a lot more shallow, the depth of field, just like a real camera would. So even...
Did you need to include a empty object, and how did you do that?
So I put the empty object there just because I didn't want to manually animate it to rack focus. And if I set it to focus on the camera, the problem is the camera's big enough where if I move in that close, it's not going to know what point on the camera I actually want it to focus on. So what I do instead is I put an empty object in the exact point that I want it to focus on. And in that case was up there on that thing. And then it can automatically focus there regardless of where the actual origin of the camera is. And an empty object is just an object you can add in the Shift-A add menu. And it doesn't render in the scene, it's just a little cross that you can move around and put places.
So like a marker, like a gaff tape marker?
Yeah, it's like a gaff tape marker except in CG. Or if you're familiar with After Effects, it's a null object.
Once you know how to use Blender, what other software is like an easy transition?
So once you learn Blender, you can easily switch to Maya, although there isn't really a reason to unless you're like hired at a studio that uses Maya because it costs a lot of money and it does the same things. And so yeah, Maya and other 3D software. Also software like Unreal Engine can be a lot easier once you know Blender, not only because you can use Blender to make assets for it, but you can also begin to actually, what am I saying? Yeah, a lot of the skills are transferable and just like knowing how to work in a 3D space. Similarly to actually knowing Minecraft, and skills at building in Minecraft are transferable into Blender.
And what about software like Nuke or DaVinci Fusion?
Compositing software? I'm sure that if you learned Blender's node editor, I haven't used either of those personally, so I can't attest to this, but if you've used Blender's node editor, I'm sure that skill would transfer over. Learning how to work with nodes, because nodes are actually very common in different types of software, especially Nuke. So yeah, Blender, I feel like learning Blender's node editor probably would help in learning those softwares. Sorry, I'm just moving all over the frame. It's probably really hard to keep me well framed. Ah, yes, that's a good idea. Turn the lights on. There's also a light switch over there. Right there. So there's one more thing I want to talk about before we just kind of leave it into just like ask questions time, I guess, which is how do you actually export this as a video? So here's the deal. In software like Premiere or After Effects, you're used to just hitting export and it renders. But remember how long it took us to render out one frame? So obviously we're going to need a better infrastructure for rendering hundreds of frames, because just hitting export and then expecting to just leave it in its default loading screen for 4 days is not viable. So we need a little bit of a better infrastructure, and Blender provides that. It gives us a lot more control in how we export. The first thing to learn is never, never, ever, at least in cycles, export a video directly. You always want to export an image sequence and then take that and combine it into a video. The reason for that is because if you're exporting an image sequence, you can pause it, shut down the program, you could even shut down your computer, and then just resume where you left off without having to start all over again. There's this classic meme in the Blender community where it's like, oh, you've rendered 99 out of 100 frames and then it crashes and now you gotta do it all over again. So exporting an image sequence, essentially, even though it gives you a bunch of PNG files or a bunch of JPEG files instead of a workable video, is a lot more robust for that reason. Because ultimately, when every frame is taking upwards of 20 minutes, you want to make sure you have your frames individually saved to your hard drive as soon as they're finished, rather than waiting for the entire thing to finish, and then if something goes wrong, or like your power goes out, or you just want to play some video games so you want to pause it, rather than losing your entire work, you can just start at the frame that you left off at. So I'm going to demonstrate rendering in Eevee here, because I don't want to sit and wait for everything to render in cycles. But it's basically the same. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to turn on motion blur down here. It's in the render settings, and we're going to come down to the motion blur tab, and we're going to click that. We can just leave the settings on default. And that, as you probably guessed, adds motion blur to your scene. Next, we're going to come under our render settings, under the advanced tab, and right here where it says seed, and it says seed 0, we're going to click on this icon. Make sure this is blue, enabled.
Still in the render setting?
Yeah, still in the render settings. Under sampling, sampling advanced, we're going to click the little stopwatch next to the seed button, next to the seed slider.
Advanced. The stopwatch.
Yes. And what that's going to do is it's going to make sure we're using a different noise pattern for the render on every frame, which basically, if you have any experience working with cameras at all, you know that noise changes every frame. So we want to mimic that here so that we don't get the same noise pattern across the entire scene, which will just give it away that it's fake. Especially given the fact that when we have noise changing every frame, our brain will actually start to filter it out. And that is not the case when it's just that. So now finally, what we're going to do is go ahead in your project folder, make a new folder, and call it like video render or something like that. And now, down here, there's this little printer icon in the properties panel. This is where we've been doing all our work. This little printer-like icon, output properties. Under output, let's go ahead and select that folder that we just made. Let's keep it rendering to PNG files. This is the one that you shouldn't do. A lot of people are tempted to go to FFmpeg video and then actually render a video. Let's save as PNG files for now, or JPEG if you want to save on space. Unless you're trying to render like an element for compositing that you're going to put into After Effects, set it to an RGB color space instead of RGBA. That way we're saving an extra color channel. And then all we're going to do is we're going to go to File, and actually let me switch my render engine to Eevee real quick before I do this. You don't have. No, you shouldn't. I just want to get through this faster because remember how long it took me to render on. So now we're going to go to Render up in the top area. Oh, and I don't have motion blur on. So we're going to go to Render, and then we're going to hit Render Animation. And that is going to, from frame 1, begin rendering our animation out to files.
And so once you have your PNG sequence assembled, how do you string that together into a video?
So there's a number of ways you could string it together into a video. If I'm putting this into a bigger Premiere file, usually I just import the PNG sequence directly into Premiere, and then Premiere can handle the putting it together into a video clip. But if I'm just like uploading it to YouTube or something, actually personally I usually run it through Adobe Media Encoder. It's a little easier, but there is a way to do it in Blender, which if I remember how to do it properly, I can show you. All right, so this is rendering now. And I'm gonna quickly give this a pause to show you how you can pause and resume it. So now I'm on frame 6, as you can see, and if I open up my renders folder, we can see frames 1 through 6 appearing. But say I want to stop it for a second. So I can go ahead and hit escape at any time, and that's going to stop the render. So now let's say I've dealt with whatever technical problem was happening, or I've finished playing my video games, and I want to start the render again. Before we hit start again, go back to the output tab. Make sure your output is still set to what it was before, but uncheck override. And now, if you begin rendering again, using File, Render Animation, just like before, it's going to see, oh, we already have frames 1 through 6 in the folder, and it's going to skip ahead and start rendering frame 7. Or you can just hit escape or close. You want to hit escape.
Oh, I swear it did not let me do that.
And one thing you'll notice is that in the rendered files, we can see all of our compositing. We've got the bloom that we did yesterday, all there.
Oh, it stayed.
Yeah, I know you're rendering in cycles. It's going to take a while. I wouldn't actually bother rendering until you have your animation finished. I just wanted to demonstrate this.
And why would you render in cycles as opposed to Eevee if Eevee is faster?
Well, first of all, because I'm teaching this class in cycles, I'm just switching to Eevee as a demonstration. I'm not teaching how to use Eevee. There's a lot of technical stuff that goes into using Eevee properly and getting a good result out of it that is beyond the scope of this class. I'm just like I kind of glossed over how I set up my scene to properly use with Eevee. Just because well, there's, a lot of stuff that goes into making it look good when you're using Eevee. And ultimately, I just wanted, because I remember it took us like half an hour. We wasted a whole bunch of time yesterday waiting for that frame to render. So I didn't want to waste everyone's time again today. That's why I'm showing this rendering in Eevee, but rendering things in cycles is the exact same workflow. And you can Google how to use Eevee if you want. It's actually not too different from cycles. It just has a few extra steps in getting it to look good, and it's not as intuitive. So.
Are there other render engines?
Cycles and Eevee are the only two render engines that come built into Blender. But there are other render engines available to use that you have to install. In fact, DreamWorks actually just open sourced their render engine Moonray, which is what they use to render How to Train Your Dragon and all their other films. And I don't know why they decided to do this, but they made it open source. So that was like yesterday that they did that. So now there's like a race going on to see who can implement it into Blender faster. Because Blender's open source, there's always sort of a cult-like community around it. So yeah, after DreamWorks, the source code's not actually publicly available yet, but once it is, there's basically gonna be like a race to see who can implement it into Blender fastest, from what I can tell.
The source because it isn't publicly available.
Well, they announced they're gonna make it public source. They announced that they're gonna make it open source, but they're still like actually assembling all the files and getting ready to publish it.
Oh, so right now the Blender community is just preparing.
Yeah, so people are like writing boilerplate code and stuff, getting it ready. As soon as it gets open source, it's like, okay, it's there, download it, build the files, throw it in. Is it working? No, let's do it again. And you're like, Blender has such a great community.
Are there like, for Blender animation studios, for example, is there a budget where active members of the Blender community can like make money from using and supporting Blender? Like,
so here's the way that Blender works, to my understanding. So the film that I showed last night was made by directly by the Blender Foundation, and that had a budget that they they paid all their actors and they paid all their, well, they didn't have any actors, but they paid all their animators and stuff for that. That was produced like a standard budgeted film. And that came out of the film's budget itself. Blender itself doesn't pay for people who contribute to it. Well, I mean, I guess it does, because people who contribute to it then get a better version of Blender that they can use for free. But aside from a few people who actually work for the Blender Foundation, most of Blender's development is unpaid, just volunteer basis. And then there is also, because Blender's a really powerful program, there is actually a marketplace for making money on Blender. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll make models and then they'll sell their models on the internet to people. So the Blender Foundation themselves isn't paying them, but people who want to use their models in their work are. And then the Blender Foundation themselves, they get funding through primarily donations. So they have a Patreon that I should actually probably link to. They also have, they get a lot of corporate sponsorships. So Epic Games, for instance, gave them a bunch of money at one point. NVIDIA hired a few developers for them, or they sent some of their own developers to go and get Blender working, the rendering engine, get the rendering engine working well. Apple contributed some of their development resources to getting Blender working well on Macs. So, yeah, that's how it works.
And so even though Blender's open source, Blender Foundation still owns the copyrights and owns...
So Blender Foundation is a nonprofit. They run blender.org, and they own like the logos and stuff. So you see this little logo down here? Blender Foundation owns the trademark to that logo. But the actual source code to Blender isn't really owned by anyone. And the reason for this is initially, and I went over this in the sort of history lesson at the beginning of this course, but initially it belonged to a company that made it, but then the company went under, right? And there was this massive crowdfunding campaign to essentially buy back the source code of Blender from that company. And they did that, and it was kind of, or from the shareholders, and it was kind of ambiguous who actually owned it at that point, because I guess the shareholders still technically owned the copyright to that base code. But nowadays, because code is contributed by everyone, when you contribute code to Blender, you're basically just licensing it. You're giving everyone an indefinite license to use it, right? So nowadays, Blender's got so much code from all over the world, from developers who have contributed to it, that no one can really say they fully own the software because it's shared amongst hundreds of developers around the world who have all contributed their code to it. So, for instance, when I coded a system that allowed you to import Minecraft and animation files into Blender, and I never actually finished this, so it never got sent back. But if that, for some reason, ended up getting packaged with vanilla Blender, everyone would have access to it, but I would still have the final say when it comes to, say, if someone wanted to buy the code off of me. I couldn't revoke, because of the license, I couldn't revoke my license that I had given to them to use it, but I'm still the only one who gets to use it commercially, if you know what I mean. So even if, say, and back when everyone was on the hate Epic bandwagon, which I don't know why everyone got on, but when everyone was on the hate Epic bandwagon and Epic contributed a lot of money to Blender's development, there were a few people in the community who started spreading rumors that, oh yeah, they're gonna buy the Blender Foundation and they're going to like make it like corporate sterile or whatever. And basically I, and along with a bunch of other people who actually read Blender's license, I actually read through the entirety of the end user license, said, like, even if a company offered to buy the Blender Foundation, and even if, for some reason, the people in charge of the Blender Foundation agreed to it, they legally would not be able to sell Blender and make it a closed source thing. I mean, yeah, they could sell the Blender Foundation itself, but then someone would just make a fork of Blender and continue developing it open source. So, like, no one...
The community could also send a cease and desist letter to...
No, the community wouldn't send... Because also, I mean, people can make their own forks and do whatever they want with. If a company wanted to make a fork of Blender that's like integrates really well with their own products and stuff, they could. But that doesn't mean it can be the only version. Even if the official Blender Foundation went crazy and went on a tangent of like corporate nonsense, the community still has access to the source code of Blender. And the community still has the legal right to use the source code of Blender. So someone would just make another version of it that doesn't have all the corporate nonsense.
Whenever this finishes rendering, and after you show us like how to assemble that into a video or whatever, can you show us how complicated the animation can get, like say with like character models?
Oh boy.
Or maybe demonstrate some examples of how Blender has been used in like feature films or
Well, I showed that film last night. I showed
Yeah.
Spring.
like outside of like Blender found animation projects.
Well, I can't show those because they're copyrighted.
But you showed the Flash.
Yeah, that was only a scene from The Flash because, and that falls under fair use because I was critiquing the scene. But even then, I still fear that YouTube's copyright algorithm might not like that. I might have to remove it from the archive. But
I know that Pony Smasher, David F. Sandberg, used Blender in Shazam, but especially Annabelle Creation. And
yeah, yeah, no, there's a lot of people who come from the indie scene love using Blender. There's actually this fairly funny, have you ever heard of Corridor Digital? In the Corridor crew?
Yeah.
So basically, you know, they're a bunch of VFX artists, and they primarily use 3ds Max, I believe, or Maya. But there's one person on the Corridor crew who actually started as an intern and is now a full-time employee, Peter. And he essentially, because he's a lot younger than everyone else and he started on Blender, he continues to insist on using Blender in the Corridor crew office, even though everyone else is using Maya, and it's kind of funny to see their debates on YouTube as to which one's better.
Didn't they have like a Blender competition to see who can make the best seamless video? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Graphics card?
Yes, the that was Clinton Jones, yeah, Punisher, his Blender competitions. Blender has so many competitions. That's the thing about a software that fosters such a big community like this. There are so many competitions that you can enter, and so many contests, and so many, just everyone challenging each other to make the best things possible. And I actually almost submitted something to that competition. I had something all lined up to go, but then I always seem to have this curse where my family decides to go on vacation at the worst possible time. And it was a week long, and my family's like, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna go spend a week like up in the mountains that week. And this was before I got this laptop, so I only had like a shitty MacBook Pro from 2013 that couldn't run Blender. So, unless I wanted to lug my desktop computer all the way up there, which I actually asked to do, and they were all like, no, don't do that.
You just realized Sling has this. Could we have used that?
Yeah. No, I researched that before this class. I was thinking we should use it, but I was too busy preparing all the slides and stuff to present it.
Next time.
Yeah.
How would you even get?
I'm not sure the actual like buttons you need to press, but I know it's possible. All right, let's see how it looks like I am about 3/4 of the way through this render, which is pretty good.
I'm almost done. And when I am done, I'll start with rendering as well.
You know, render times is one of the big meme fosters in the community. Another thing about having a massive community like this is you get the competitions, but you also get the memes. There are so many memes related to Blender, and a lot of them revolve around render time and waiting for things to render. No, I did not.
Oh my god. Their whole server room crashed. And it took like 4 weeks to render that.
Yeah, I believe it. Especially back then, rendering engines have got a lot better as of lately, not just because of like improvements in software, but also improvements of hardware. The gaming industry's actually fostered that a lot because everyone wants this high-end like because video game rendering is also really difficult. So everyone wants this high-end rendering hardware for video games, and it's like, oh yeah, we can also use that to render things in CG. We really don't need to be staring at my chest as it opens frame by frame, Ben. Like, that is not going to be visually interesting on stream.
I know, I was just showing off like this. Sorry, not sorry.
That is fast.
What do you got?
I have a cannonball shot out and a monkey.
Nice. So, yeah, camera work was horrible on this one because I pointed the entire thing at your keyboard that time. The main thing I would recommend with that camera movement is try to make it a little smoother. Because what you got right now is you've got two very distinct camera moves. It's moving forward, and then it's turning to the right. What I would recommend is have it continue moving forward a little bit, even if it slows down throughout the entire duration of the shot. And then make it, maybe you don't have it turning right the entire time, but it should take a lot longer to get up to speed turning right than what it does right now. Because again, think about how you would do it in real life. If you were doing it in real life, you wouldn't think, oh, discrete camera movement. I'd move forward and I'd turn right, unless you're making something like Grand Budapest Hotel or something like that. Very stylized. But in general, what you would probably be doing is the camera operator would be moving the camera forward and then be like, oh shit, the action's happening over here, and then begin moving it to the right, but not fully stop moving it forward.
Okay, what did I just do?
Oh, you're in texture paint mode. Just click on that button and then back to object mode. There we go.
So smoother.
And one thing that can actually be helpful is to puppeteer the camera potentially. So what you can do is if you turn on auto keyframe and then you actually play your animation but then move things as you're playing it, it will create a keyframe essentially every time you move it. So I'm not sure, this is a technique I use in Source Filmmaker a lot. You can actually look through your camera view and then, wait, I don't think it's as easy in Blender, unfortunately, though, but yeah, never mind. A little bit more advanced in the scope of this class.
But I will take your advice and make it smoother. Oh,
What?
this whole thing, the walls on a keyframe.
Oh, you
know that.
keyframed your set?
Yeah.
Wait, play it?
I guess I did.
Oh, no, it's not, I don't think.
Look,
Or maybe it is.
jiggle.
Oh crap, you did keyframe your set. Yeah, you can just hit the delete key with the keyframe selected to get rid of them.
That's terrible. Okay, one more jiggle. Is there like an ease in?
Oh, what?
An ease in?
Yeah, that's what you use the graph editor for.
Oh.
Or you can do that.
Yeah.
I don't.
You don't recommend it?
I don't personally use that very much, so I can't attest to how good it is. But that is a way that you can, I think. Yeah, learning the graph editor is very essential in creating smooth and realistic animations. You need that precise control as to how things are actually moving in the scene.
Yeah,
You gotta scroll to front. Wow, your sensitivity on this mouse is high. Wait, hold on. Is that a Blender mouse?
Is it? No.
The logo looks just like Blender logo.
Yeah, it's a still series. Something.
Looks like a Blender mouse.
Does
Yeah.
Blender sell mouses?
They don't. Well, actually, I wouldn't be surprised. They sell all kinds of merch.
Maybe one day. So that would be...
Yeah. Basically, the trick to thinking about this is every animation channel is just because we're looking at our X, Y, and Z separately, every animation channel is just a singular float value, a singular number, right?
Yep.
So it could be 0, it could be 1, it could be 0.75. So instead of having, okay, we have a vector, our X, Y, and Z values of our object, we can think, oh yeah, we have 3 animation channels, one for the x-axis, one for the y-axis, one for the z-axis. The graph editor just pits those individual scalar values against time on the x-axis. So just think about it like a graph like that, and you can then use the handles to manipulate it however you want.
Okay. So that would be...
Ooh, it looks like my thing is finished rendering.
It's done?
Yeah, I rendered it in Eevee explicitly so it would get done pretty fast. It's been half an hour too.
How long do you think mine is going to take?
I don't know, it could take overnight, to be honest. Video renders often take overnight. So I'm actually going to show you a tool coming up here on how to mitigate this, but first I want to show you how to combine everything together. So here you've got your image sequence. Now what I would be doing in my workflow is, Ben, can we focus on our, okay. I thought you were still on that camera. What we would be doing in my workflow is we would take it into Adobe Media Encoder and put it together into a video. So what do you think? Should we just do Adobe Media Encoder, or should I show you how to do it in Blender?
Blender would be nice.
All right. So now what we're going to do, and this is a view that's kind of we don't really use for anything else. I told you it had a really crappy video editor, right? Well, this really crappy video editor can be used fairly efficiently for putting all these together into a video. So let's go ahead and actually add a new workspace up here. And we're going to make it the video editing workspace. So we get this. So now let's go ahead and add, and we're going to add an image/sequence. Go into our renders folder. No, wait, this is the wrong. Where did I render this to? How did I end up? This happens to me so often. I accidentally end up exporting it to the wrong folder. I exported it to this other folder that I was using when rendering the. All right, well, let's find my project folder I seem to have lost. I put it on my desktop, I think. Yeah, Backrooms demo. Here we go. Let's go ahead and put our frames actually on here. Here we go. So we can see, Windows Explorer doesn't do a very good job of this. But I can take this, Control A, And I want to make sure that we're viewing it in order. So use these tools to make sure it's in order properly. Starting on frame 1, add image strip. And now we can actually get an idea of what this finally looks like rendered. And it's going to be really slow because Blender's video editor is not optimized whatsoever. But now, and this is going to override anything we render in the scene, we've still got our output resolution and frame rate set to the right things, but now we can do what I told you not to do before, and we can set this to FFmpeg video. Set our encoding. Let's go to an MP4 codec, an MP4 container, H.264. Let's go high quality. And that's probably good. And we'll just set, we'll save it to this folder here. And I'll call it, when I'm saving this, I'll call it render. All right, wait, no, I just realized I'm still saving it to the wrong folder, render. There we go. A little tip, in any of these file path entries, if you type a // it will represent the current folder that the blend file is in. So there I was able to really quickly return to the proper folder just by typing the // there. I'm not sure if it works in this. Let me see. It does. So that's a really easy way to get there. Great. And now I'll just do render animation again. And you'll notice it's rendering significantly faster because it's not actually re-rendering the scene. It's just taking the already rendered scene from the PNG files and it's outputting to the file. So there we go. I've just rendered it. Now we've got our MP4 file. And quick note, you probably want to delete this from the video editor before you try to do anything else, or else it'll just render that. And then you'll be confused once you change the scene and want to re-render it, and you don't know why it's not working. And now we have our exported video. Now, of course, doing this last step is optional in Blender. You can do it in any program that you want that can take an image sequence and turn it into a video. And I think I said that in general, I actually used Adobe Media Encoder rather than Blender to do this step. But this is a Blender class, so I'll keep it on topic. And here we go.
How did you get that to loop?
Oh no, that was just I threw it into that's a thing that I did as part of this presentation setup. Has nothing to do with Blender.
Let's check it back in with Jabril. Hello.
We are now both looking over your shoulder, very curious as to what you're doing.
Okay. I'm stretching every... Yep, that's too fast.
Ooh, monkey!
So yeah, that's basically it when it comes to what I had planned for this class. So I'll stick around. Let's keep the live stream on just in case there's any other questions. Oh, no, it's not. I had one more thing.
Over, guys.
You know what? That will wait until your scene is ready to render.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, how's it look?
Let's see if my computer won't cry. Yeah, I just want to see.
Yours is already rendered. What's the specs of this computer?
It is.
Well, you got that thing, so it's probably better than mine.
Yeah. I mean, why isn't anything going to the GPU though?
Did you follow the setup tutorial that I showed you?
Yeah, I think I did.
No,
Well,
it's not finished. Here's what you need to do. You need to go to File, Edit,
Edit
Preferences.
preferences.
And we went over this day one, but you weren't on this computer, so. Then you're going to go to System,
System.
and you're going to set the Cycles Render Device to Optics. Up there. Optics.
Oh, optics.
There we go.
Cool. So now it's using the GPU.
Now it's going to use the GPU, yes.
Oh, and it's actually showing up.
Yeah.
And I could support it.
So you got to click out. Yeah. So now close out of there, and you'll notice it renders significantly faster, and it is using your GPU. So yeah, if any of you forgot that, go back to my lesson day one, go watch that again, and I show you how to set that up so it properly utilizes your GPU. So how long is that going to take to render if you hit F12?
Hold on. End frame.
Oh, this is just for rendering one frame, just to see how well your system handles this scene. Oh yeah, that's doing it very well. So a good way to judge how long your animation is going to take to render is to look at measure how long it takes to render one frame, and then multiply that by your amount of frames. So that's why I didn't even bother trying to render this as an animation, because I knew it took like half an hour for one frames, times like 200 frames is going to take like multiple days on that computer. And I wanted to get to how to assemble it into a file.
So the samples are is basically the quality, right?
Yeah, so the higher samples you render to, the less noise it's going to have in your scene. But also the higher samples you render to, the longer it's going to take. So it's been long debated, and it still is being debated within the Blender community, how many samples you should target. And how to find the best amount of samples. 512 is generally a pretty good starting point. And I personally, especially with denoising enabled, I think 512 will be pretty good for that scene. That's for the viewport. You'd have to scroll down to see it for the render. Under the render tab. Yes, you do have denoising enabled, so.
You hear that? You hear that noise?
Yeah. Denoise. Now we wait. And then, like, if I wanted a video for like, what, 9 o'clock or 8:45, that wouldn't really be possible?
Probably not unless you use Sheepit, which I'm going to cover soon.
Say what?
I'll get to it. And yeah, this is why people buy computers with like gigantic graphics cards.
Yeah.
For this very reason.
And thus, thick, heavy. bases.
Yeah. I didn't want one of those.
Well, I mean, desktop computers are what I'm talking about.
Like that.
Yeah. But even more than that. Think this graphics card, twice the size and 2 of them. People will put that in one computer just for rendering.
Really?
Yeah.
There's some other board chipsets that could take like 4 graphics cards.
Yeah.
You watch this?
Okay, your GPU usage just went down to 0, meaning it's probably finished. So look at the render view. And switch from your viewer node over to your render result. And why is it empty? Let's take a look at your compositing. No, down there. Look at those nodes. Where is your composite output? Okay. So why your composite's empty? I'm not sure why your composite is empty. Keep in mind that your viewer node and your compositor node are actually 2 separate nodes. So whatever's coming out of here is empty for some reason. It's because you set your mix to -1. Your mix should be 0. Now let's check what the viewer sees from here. If you've got your glare. Oh, and fog glow is what I was using. Yeah, you don't want your mix at 1 or -1. You want it at 0.
Noted.
You probably want to turn your threshold down as well to make it actually visible. And then do you want to run through your color correction?
No.
Okay. So in that case, you want, yeah, your composite node plugged into the glare, which you have.
So could I just do that?
Your viewer is what, the only thing the viewer node is going to impact is what is showing in the background of this editor.
Oh, okay.
Your composite node is what is actually the final product.
Okay. But this is the image we just rendered, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this, oh, that's my hue and saturation.
So you probably want your hue and saturation to come after the glare node. Generally, you want to try to mimic the order of operations that you would get in real life. So first it would be lens effects like glare. Well, actually, first it would be world effects like fog, if you had any fog in your scene. And then it would be lens effects like glare. And then it would be any post-processing effects like hue and saturation.
So it would be something like that?
Yeah. Looks good. All right. Now, how do we render this into a scene in a timely manner? So, big studios, most of the time, they have, you go to anything like Pixar and they're going to be bragging about their render farm, which is just this big room filled with computers, servers, to render that. We obviously don't have one, although I've been trying to convince BCM to get one for some time. Luckily, that is a problem that more than us in the community have faced, and there is a solution other than paying to use a render farm. And that is called, let me pull it up. Here comes the And that solution that people have come up with is called Sheepit. Now, Sheepit is not a traditional render farm where they provide all the computers that are rendered on. Sheepit is a nonprofit, and what it does is everyone who is able to, who uses the render farm, can contribute their own computer and connect their own computer to the render hive mind in a way.
It's one of those, like the
Sort of like that, yeah. Except a lot less sketchy than those VPN things. It's very well trusted within the Blender community, so no need to worry about like getting hacked or anything like that. And it's actually optional to contribute your computer. Basically the way it works is it has a points system. So whenever you connect your computer to the render farm, you get points, and then the more points you have, the higher priority your project is to render. So even if you don't have a computer that's capable of rendering, you can still use it, it's just going to take longer. So,
But it's faster than...
yeah, it's still going to be faster than rendering it on your own computer alone, unless you're using Eevee. I don't know why they have an option to use Eevee, because it doesn't make much sense to use Eevee with a render farm. So I already have an account, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. Yeah, no, a few years ago, I managed to put together a server that I was able to render like 24/7 on. That's how I got all these points. But I'm going to go ahead and prepare my project for rendering on Sheepit. So first thing I'm going to do is pack all my resources. So remember how I was talking about how Blender, you need to keep all your dependencies together? All your text, that's why we have a project folder. Now, sometimes you might want to send your blend file to someone else without having to pack up your project folder. So this is where this really cool feature comes in. If you go to File, External Data, you can actually pack all your resources into the blend file. And let me do a Control-Shift-S to save as and save a packed version.
So it's File, External...
It's File, External Data, Pack Resources. And now you'll notice that my packed version is like 5 times the size of my original .blend file. It's really big. That's because it's taken everything that I ended up using here in my project folders, and it's packed it all inside. So I can send this file and it's not going to be missing any resource. That is crucial for uploading to a render farm. Regardless of if it's Sheepit or any other render farm, you always pack your resources before you send the file. So now, I'm just going to demonstrate using Sheepit. I'm going to hit Get Started, and I'm going to open my file. And now Sheepit, unfortunately, does have a file cap, so it is possible if you have a big scene to exceed the size, and then you have to like lower the resolution of your textures. That's why I was encouraging you to use JPEGs at 4K rather than 8K PNGs. So let's go ahead and open our packed project file, and we'll upload the file. And, ooh, let me make sure okay, I did switch back to cycles. That would have been embarrassing had I forgotten to do that. It depends. I've gotten it back in a few hours before. It also seems to take forever to upload because I guess their main server, their central server, is really slow. And it will warn you if you try to upload a file that you haven't packed your textures on.
So it's just going to be all gray?
It would be all pink. But the website will tell you, like in red text, hey, you've got missing resources. Like, are you sure you want to try to render this? So let's go ahead and have that. Now, generally, Sheepit, the way it was originally designed, was that it would break your render up into tiles and then only render parts of the frame on different computers. The problem is that disables all compositing and doesn't work well with the new version of Blender. So I generally try to keep it down to 1 tile. But that means that it has to take less than 20 minutes to render a single frame in order for it to accept it. Now, generally, if it takes more than 20 minutes to render a single frame on not crap hardware, you've got to optimize your scene a little better. So
this is getting sent up to a
Well, right now it's getting sent up to the central computer. And then once I hit render, it'll start sending it out to random computers somewhere.
Why are there so few projects that are currently being worked on? How many computers are on the network at any given point?
Where does it say there's few projects?
It says like 15 projects right now.
Where does it say that? I'm trying. Oh, yeah, here.
The waiting list, and then on the front page.
Basically, it runs on the idea that there aren't actually very many people who want to be rendering something at a time. And Sheepit has actually declined in popularity in the previous years. And also, I used to run a render server for Sheepit, so I have a lot of points. So here we can decide, do we want this to be just rendered on the CPU or the CPU and GPUs? We'll set it to both for now. Some render computers only have CPUs, some render computers only have GPUs. We'll set our start frame to 1, our end frame to, okay, it automatically detected 140, and we'll keep it at 1 tile. Any advanced options? No, don't need to bother with that. And we want to be 3.2. You can uncheck this and restrict the access to your project if you're worried about someone stealing your work. You can make it so it's not just uploaded to a random computer, but a set of computers you trust.
When you send it out to a random computer, like does it open Blender on a computer?
Basically, if you actually were to connect your computer to the render farm, there's a program that you download that like handles all of that, so it would open Blender automatically, make sure you have the right version, all that type of stuff. So
you could see someone's project getting rendered on your computer.
Yeah, you can. So if you have like sensitive information, and like also they don't allow you to render not safe for work stuff for that reason.
Yeah, like that stuff.
So anyway, and we can choose to, yeah, we don't need to generate the MP4. We can put the frames together into that later. And we'll go ahead and add this blend.
How many resources did it take to run your own render farm?
Well, I mean, it was just, oh, I don't know why AMD GPUs are disabled. Should enable that. Yeah, basically, I was running a server anyway. I had a spare computer. So I decided, you know what, this is gonna be running in the basement anyway. I might as well download the Sheepit client onto it and render it.
And how long did it take you to rack up 3 million points?
I had it running for like maybe like a month or two.
Wow. Just running nonstop.
Yeah, I just left it in the basement.
What was your electric bill?
I don't know. I didn't tell my parents I was doing this, so. But I think they knew eventually, but like, it wasn't actually too bad though. I mean, in comparison to stuff like, it was a winter month, so we like had the electric bill go up because of the heat. So.
What other stuff were you running on the server?
Occasionally, I actually later, the reason I stopped is because I swapped it to running a Minecraft server. If you have access to your router, it should be pretty easy. If you don't have access to your router and instead it's hogged by someone else in your family who has no idea what they're doing with it, it's a lot harder.
Okay. What other stuff were you running on it?
At the time, that was all I was running on it. That's why I was running it on it. I actually turned it off when I wanted to run other stuff.
You weren't mining Bitcoin?
No, I was not mining Bitcoin. I've never personally really been into the cryptocurrency fad. I mean, I don't judge the people who do it, but like, it's never really interested me.
Even NFTs?
NFTs a little more because it gives artists like me the chance to make money off their work. But
have you made NFTs?
I have not made NFTs. I probably could try. But the NFT market right now is just a complete mess. It's probably not worth it. But no, when it comes to cryptocurrency, plus the server wasn't nearly powerful enough to make any kind of money doing cryptocurrency. Far more worth it, in my opinion, to render unsheep it.
Specs of your render farm?
It was crap. It was like this, I don't even remember what it had. Didn't have a GPU, only CPU.
Was it comparable to that?
Oh no, it was a lot less powerful. Maybe the laptop. No, the laptop even has a GPU. My computer didn't have a GPU. It was all running on CPU.
Dang, and you still have a Minecraft server on it? I know this is off topic.
Well, no, I didn't run the Minecraft server at the same time as the render farm.
Okay.
The reason I stopped rendering is because I put a Minecraft server on it.
How many people could you get on your Minecraft server?
We got about maybe 8 people at once.
Without lag?
8 people at once during events, and during events we would all be like in the same location, so it's only rendering the amount of chunks that you would load for like maybe 3 people. 8 people spread out across the server is going to be a lot laggier than 8 people all in one place.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get into, I don't know, I wanted to make my own server. I don't want to have to pay, so I was thinking about that.
Yeah, self-hosting is actually really common, and there's a lot of resources on doing it.
And like, not a lot of people talk about it, despite how easy it seems.
People talk about it, you just have to be in the right circles.
That I'm not in the right space. Not in the right circle. Poor
Yeah.
ivory.
I can render yours on my Sheepit account if you want.
I just have to unwrap everything, and then because the texture's messed up,
Okay, yeah.
let's see if I remember how to do that. Click on it. It's there. Yeah, that's the wrong thing. Why am I seeing that? Yeah, that's the wrong thing.
Can you shut my mic off? I'm gonna go eat.
Background wall. Okay. Oh, I hit you. Cube projection. Cube size. Aha. New one. I think cube's better. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful.
had to. Blender's resource limits scale like a lot. So Blender won't be afraid to hog up your entire computer because you told it to do an operation that was fairly resource intensive. Yeah. Like, I once had to force shut down my computer because Blender managed to freeze my entire display. Yeah.
It's just like, hey, I'm eating everything.
And I've seen Blender cause a blue screen of death before as well. That probably means it crashed.
When I was trying to save.
Was Blender doing some other operation?
What's that?
Well, that's the render view.
I mean, that was already done though, right?
I think so.
Okay, we're back.
Oh, okay.
I've been blessed by the computer gods. Okay.
All right. You sure you don't want to make your wall texture a little smaller?
A little smaller.
Just because it looks kind of big right now.
Do you have yours to 1 meter?
I have mine to 2 meters.
Oh. Yeah. So I do that. Go like that. What did I do?
U cube projection.
Still not having security cameras.
What?
I'm still not having security cameras.
I can't see a thing. Oh, there we go. I think that looks good.
Great. Remember to save.
Oh yeah, thank you.
There's something playing your computer.
What the hell?
It's doing it again. Why is it doing this?
If that were coming through the Sling Studio, it would also be coming through the TV. Like, if I actually play something on my computer, like it comes through the TV, so that's on the iPad.
What?
That's playing on the iPad.
How? Why?
It's
so random.
iPad.
What?
It's a cool iPad.
Yeah, it belongs to the station.
No, I don't know. Wait. Oh my god, this is so...
All right, you ready to? Oh God, what do you have in this file that it would be taking so long to save? You packed your resources, right?
Yeah.
That might be why. What textures did you end up using? Did you end up using any like K textures?
No, I didn't. That was only for the skybox thingamajigger, but that's not attached to this.
Huh. Well, anyway, go ahead and send me the file over.
I mean, it should already be saved. I won't close it out just yet.
Well, no, it's saving right now. That's what it's doing, is it's not responding. If you close it while it's trying to do that, it can corrupt the file.
I made another save. The previous reason why I was lagging, because I was saving.
Okay. What is your size?
So it's packed.
That's 200 megabytes. That's not bad. I don't know why it's...
Probably. How big is Blender? Blender
Well,
isn't that big, right?
The blend file itself isn't that big, but if you have a lot of images and stuff, it can take up space. So I'd expect a packed file to be a lot bigger. 200 megabytes should not be taking that long to save.
Oh, it's not Mac.
What?
Yeah, and I only have 5 gigabytes of free space, so that could be the issue too.
Yeah, probably actually. Because the system has to look around for free space on the drive, because...
It thinks my hard drive is plugged in the 4 terabyte one, but it's not.
Huh.
So
Anyway, you want to go ahead and give that file over to me, and then I can send it to the render farm?
this is actually in here. Oh, everything's running off here.
That's probably why it's taking so long to save, because flash drives are slow.
That's true. Well, it's already saved, so bam. Oh.
Great. And I shall load this up, make sure that all the resources are there, and crap, I'm out of USB cables. Let's see. This is just charging the,
Do you have any more USB-C?
No, I'm using them both on. We need to plug this into something else, because this is just power.
I have an idea. Pull this.
Okay. Should probably swap back to the wide. What? No, don't do that. Don't. That's not a that's just a power pass through. What we need is something to.
Do you have Bluetooth carrier?
That could work though.
Something. Oh yeah. There we go.
All right, now the question is, I don't know if this is going to read though. Yeah, no, I'm not reading the drive. So, no, I don't. I think that this doesn't
Stop on
work.
the mouse then.
Yeah, I'll just. No, I need the mouse. Can we? Yeah, let me.
Jabril, what if you did it on your computer?
Oh, yeah.
Here, you know what? I'm gonna do. I'm
He
gonna.
has all the points.
Yeah, no, that was the point. I was gonna load it up on. What can I unplug? I can. Here we go. I'm going to move this splitter over to. How did that not immediately shut off the display? There we go. Is this still working? Yeah, it is. Huh, that's odd. We still have a feed on the sling of the display, right? Yeah, we do. Huh, weird. Anyway, what I'm gonna do is I am gonna go ahead and, so let me plug this into
Can I just
here now.
Skype it to you?
What?
Couldn't I just like Skype it to you or Bluetooth share it?
Probably, but now I have it plugged in, so. Let's go ahead and open this up.
Is anybody else here?
No. Where did you save it?
Jabril Backrooms.
Great. Let's
It's the second pack, yeah.
Let's open this up. I should probably close mine out. Meanwhile, let's check in with how this is doing. Still waiting, it looks like. Oh, actually, no, we've got a lot of rendering here. Look at this. These are all the rendered frames.
That's cool. So all the blue stuff is the one that's finished?
Yeah.
The images that's finished.
Though it does look a little overexposed. That's fine. So, is your file, here is your file. That's why sound design is so important. Yep, here we go. Nice camera animation, great. So all the assets are here. Let me go ahead and upload this to Sheetbit. Okay, yeah, no, we should be fine lengthwise. Let me actually double check your compositing nodes because I feel like I don't want this to render and then be black the entire time. Let's check your compositing. compositing. Okay, good. You do have your composite output set. Great. So now we just wait for this to finish uploading. And at the same time, we can take a look at my render, see how this is going. Yeah, so this is already rendered so much more than my machine would have been capable of in this amount of time.
And can you see what projects have been rendered publicly on this website?
I don't believe you can, but, well, they do actually have some like bloating projects down here, but.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a drone that can take 360 images. Kind of. It's really weird. You know what? I'll just show you. What did I just? Oh, sorry, just service. Wow, they deleted all my photos. It's always cool. Yeah, basically my drone takes photos like this. And could I use like those photos for the thing we did yesterday?
Not directly. What you would need to do is you'd need to take a bunch of photos at a bunch of different exposures, and then use software to combine those into an HDRI image.
Where could I find the software?
Google it. I actually don't know. Basically, find software for taking HDRIs, find tutorials on doing that, and then just apply that to your drone.
It's like Photoshop cannot do it.
Yeah. Well, I think Photoshop can be used part of it. All right, here we go. So we've got AMD NVIDIA cards, one tile because we want to keep your compositing. And let's add this blend.
Let me stop spinning.
All right, so your project has now been sent off to the render farm.
And get your back drones one. Oh, let's do it right here.
Something's definitely wrong with the website when you do this. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
Do you think there's people that have more sheep it points than you?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's already uploaded to the website. I think it's in the queue. I have to check where it is. Oh, it's rendering on the reference machine. That's what it's doing. Basically, the way Sheepit works is that it renders one frame on like a reference machine, uses that to calculate basically how much time, how hard the project is to render, and then it updates how it distributes its to the render users based on that.
Okay. So it assesses how hard the project will be to render.
Yeah. I'd say our projects are about medium sized. I mean, they're interiors, and interiors are always harder to render than exteriors, but they're not making use of like volumetrics or any of the like really complex stuff that makes it take forever. So, yeah. Do you have any other questions, or should we go ahead and end the stream? So personally, remember how I was showing off my DeviantArt page at the beginning of this class? All of those come from just me practicing. So I just make posters. I make these types of posters. I started with this one at the very beginning of the pandemic because I was bored. And then I just continue. Here's the one I've been using for the thumbnail of this class. And yeah, I just make posters, think of cool ideas, try to render them. Each one of these has a bit of a story behind why I decided to make the idea.
Can you click on the Minecraft one?
Yeah, well, this one, it's because, have you ever heard of Tubi2T?
Yes, I have.
So I played on Tubi2T for a little over a year. And this was the base that I had. And then it got griefed one day. But I had a world backup, so maybe a year later, I decided to go back to that world backup and like actually make it look like a ruin, and then render this image. So it was kind of an homage to that. And then this one's because I was feeling lonely during the pandemic, so I made that. And then this one was a joke, because everyone always talks about Blender like it's a cult. So I thought that, you know, okay, the monkey's the mascot of Blender. What if we actually make it a cult and render like an ancient temple of the monkey? So that's what I did. So yeah, just make posters. That's how I got good at the software. Make posters, and also make models, 3D models if you want to get better at modeling. Here are some of the 3D models that I've made. Yep. This took forever. This is actually the second iteration of it. Essentially, I was fed up with all the Source Filmmaker projects making use of the really low resolution in-game model for the portal gun, so I decided to just make my own model. Came out pretty good, I think. And then a lot of these were just like this one, I was sitting in a chapel for an event, and this table was there, and I really liked it, so I decided to model it. So just basic stuff like that. Just practice, and posters are a really good, like low stress, low risk way to practice. Like if you make a shitty poster, it's just you made a shitty poster. It's not gonna be the end of your career. So, yeah.
Is the cube from a game?
This is from Portal 2. How do you recognize the portal gun but not the cube?
Okay, my first introduction to Portal was probably from a Minecraft
Makes sense. The portal gun mod for Minecraft was pretty popular.
So yeah, that's how I found out about Portal. It was always being on Steam. It will always be on sale. Was it on the PS3?
It was.
Yeah, that also too. So I would just browse the PS3 store when I had a PS3. Trying to convince my parents if I
Yeah.
could.
No, this one I actually ripped all the assets from the game to make this. So I mean, it's a source game, so it's kind of easy to do that. I just ripped all the assets, threw them into Blender, and made that poster.
Is that all the material you were covering today?
Yeah, that's all. I mean, I was wanting to see if there was any more questions that we should put on record in case anyone else has them. But
Well, Jabril, if you're satisfied, you know what to do.
What? Comment and subscribe. Everyone, let's take Sam for the class. That's all I need
Exactly.
here.
Congratulations, Sam. You just completed your first BCM course. How
Thanks.
do you feel?
exhausted. Yeah, I feel exhausted.
You deserve a big hug.
Thank you for doing the stream tech. Now I just need to find the...
Don't thank me. You did all the hard work.
Yeah.
Jabril, it was nice having you as a student in Sam's class. I enjoyed seeing you. Good night.
You
It's
too.
been good. I hope we get to work together in the near future.
Yeah, most definitely.
What?
Nothing. I'm watching it.
Inception. You know what's really cool? If you place this right here, look at the reflection.
Wait, no, more than just that. This is the program view right now.
Oh shit. Wait. So
Let's wait.
Okay, hold on.
Wait. Oh yeah, I pointed it.
this is hilarious.
Will it do it?
And look, you can see the background. You're in the computer moving, right? You can see the chest from the window. But then, oh my god, this is.
Oh, but it doesn't do the thing.
What thing?
Okay. So point it at the.
Oh, this is.
No, it's doing it. It's doing it. Look,
It is.
it's just taking a long time because it's got a delay.
The infinite loop. Oh my god. Oh my god. You could do it even more.
Oh yeah, it's happening. Oh my god. What have we done?
It's happening there. That's so cool.
Alright.
All right, now this.
Oh. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
Okay, I'm ending the stream now.
Good.